Reginald, I'm Jennifer.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can. How are you?
I am well.
All right,
Started
Reginald.
my video.
Yep, let me make you a co-host. Okay, so now you can start
Okay.
to screen share.
Well, can I start?
Yep, so you can screen share.
Yes, but I was going to introduce myself just with my regular screen, or do I have to start with?
Oh no, sorry, my misunderstanding. Let's test your screen share just to make sure it
Okay,
works, and then
okay,
then you can pull it down.
okay. Let me. And my slideshow. Oh, do you see my
I
screen?
see I see a map of Iowa, the top like three
Yes, the
tiers.
top. Okay. Because I thought I would see it in the window right below my, um, up in the upper right-hand corner, but evidently I do not. I guess your screen is State Historical Society and just has the, uh,
Yeah, it just has
banner.
our logo. So
Yeah,
yeah,
okay,
when you present, Zoom gets a little bit weird when you start
yes,
presenting with the slideshow. So if this map is your first slide,
yes,
I can see you on my computer. So what I would recommend is just leaving this up as people enter the room, and
yes,
people can see you like I can see you. So
okay,
I would
in the
suggest just
corner,
leaving your screen share up, and then just do your introduction from this point.
okay, sounds good.
Okay. So is this map your first slide?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect, perfect. All
That,
right.
that that's why I wanted to talk first, but
Yeah. So, yeah.
because people may wonder if they're getting into the correct session
I
if they
didn't come to
just
a
see a
session on
map.
geography. Um, okay, so Reginald, I have a quick introduction that you sent to Leo that I will
Yes.
read out loud once we get started. And then I will say, I'll turn it over to you for you to begin. And then would you like me to monitor the Q&A and read the questions to you?
Yes, that'd be helpful.
Okay, I will.
That's one less thing for me to manage.
And I'll save them for the end.
Yes.
Okay. And also, I have another presentation right after yours, so we do have to end on time.
Yes. I'm hopeful that that will happen.
Okay.
Trying
Yeah.
to find an appropriate slide to begin with. This is, yeah,
Okay.
this
All
is
right.
probably a good one. This is the first year they were playing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I'll
All
go
right.
back to the
Well,
beginning when we.
okay. So people are coming into the session, and we will
Okay,
officially begin at 10:20. So in about 4 minutes.
okay. Would you let me know when that is? Because I can't see my clock.
Yes, I will. I will
This
come
is
back
first.
on and make the introduction. So that's when you'll know that we can start.
Okay, should I mute right now?
It's up to you. You're not being very loud, so I think you're fine.
Okay.
Reginald, are you ready? Reginald, if you're there, we're ready to begin. There you are. All right, everybody,
Yes.
welcome.
Okay.
My name is Jennifer Cooley, and it's great to have you here with us this morning for History Camp Iowa. I'm excited to introduce our next session, which is Iowa's Forgotten Black Champions with Reginald Green. Reginald is a University of Northern Iowa Emeritus Administrator with a current focus on centers on combating racism and collaboration with a range of organizations. He's a holder of a graduate degree in both art education and sociology after academic study at 6 separate Midwestern and public private universities and college. So Reginald, I'm very happy to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. I am, yes, that Reginald Green, and I'm happy that you're joining us this morning. And I hope to, first of all, I want to say this is not exclusively about baseball. That's the foundation, but it covers a wider range than just that. And I'm particularly interested when there becomes a confluence of sport and race and how that dynamic works, because it's a good microcosm of our society. The story of the Algona Brownies, this is the first year, 1901, that the picture you're seeing that they were in existence, encompasses lessons from history and with applications for today, and the intersectionality that produces. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. A frequent question that I get is, when people first hear of the Algona Brownies, the question that comes up is, how did an all-black team get to the small town of Algona, Iowa? And let me get to the beginning of my slideshow here, so you have a feel for that. Kind of quick preview. Algona is in north central Iowa. It's located right there. It's a small town in comparison to many other places in the United States. And that was part of the question when I first heard about the Algona Brownies, that it triggered that same question to me. And my first reaction was, there must be another Algona in, somewhere in the United States, maybe New York or someplace else back east. Surely Algona, Iowa, which I was familiar with in the early or the mid 60s, because I went to college, if you can see my cursor, in Forest City, Iowa, at Waldorf College there. And so it couldn't have been, and particularly, at the turn of the century, that certainly wasn't possible. But some years or a few years later, I ran across, in reading some of my history books I've discovered on Black baseball, that it truly was Algona, Iowa. So I investigated a little bit further, and when I retired and was able to travel more freely, I went to Algona and started doing direct research on the brownies with the intention of sharing the story and developing some programs related to that. Um, let's go to the next slide here. Um, in 1903, this team that was all black um, did win the Western United States Championship and of Negro baseball is the term that they used then. And to put that kind of in context, it was they were an independent professional team, and they would arrange games sometimes on the fly. That the owners would write to various teams around and schedule games. So it kind of depended on the availability of the other teams. They did win the state of Iowa amateur championship in 1902 and in 1903. The the circumstance there is that even though they were being paid, they were still considered amateurs because they were not in professional team. They weren't a professional team and a member of the minor league system. So they were very, very competitive. The first year of existence, the 1901 team that was a mixed race team, they had the opportunity to win the state championship, but they lost their final game against the eventual champs. My research led me to, and with colleagues from the University of Northern Iowa in the communication studies area, I give them some props here. Francesca Schoen, who's done a number of award-winning documentaries, and a longtime buddy of mine, Dr. Paul Siddons, who's head of the Communication Studies Department at the university. The three of us collaborated and produced a documentary movie that has not been released yet because it got completed last August, and we wanted to wait until we could have safely have an audience to tell this story. But the title of the movie is Champions All, the Incomplete Story of the Algona Brownies. That is a little bit different take on this story. I'm covering things in this presentation that are not included there. And also, if any of you are listening that are familiar with me, friends of mine, this is not like my vacation slideshows that I have shown at my house in the past, even though I'm broadcasting from my kitchen in Cedar Falls, Iowa. The American baseball has a institutional history starting in the mid 1800s. The game intertwines many of the institutional realms in this country, such as historical, cultural, political, and economic. The Brownies story illustrates the intersectionality most significantly between business, race, and community notoriety with baseball, or using baseball as that tool. Specifically, how a few enthusiastic businessmen in a small town in north central Iowa got together and formed the Algona Baseball Association in order to enhance the notoriety of Algona, and also to provide entertainment. They enjoyed the game of baseball, and they used the methodology that other communities had used, but not many of them, when they put together an all-black team. There were a number of teams that had one or two black players typically, but they kind of saw the talent pool and went after that. Also, at that time, the Brownies were one of the few financially successful teams in Iowa. Considering, we want to look at maybe some of the aspects of, before we get more deeply into the Brownies, of the early 20th century. A few observations came to mind that'll give us a general sense about that era that this was going on. The Consolidation Coal Company founded it founded Buxton, Iowa in 1895, just 6 years before the Brownies were put together. And if you're familiar with the Buxton story, this is shaft number 10 in Buxton, Iowa. It's located in central or south central Iowa, the population consisted of many Black African American people, as well as Swedish, German, and Welsh Americans. They were all miners, and the Buxton is what was one of the more successful communities, interracial communities, that was integrated in the United States, and also with a large African American population. It was also famous with the mining industry at that time, generating highly successful middle class individuals, and also many successful professional people came out of Buxton. This is a photograph from November 10. Well, actually, I think this was on the 12th, the actual photograph of 3 years before the Brownies came into existence. 1898 in Wilmington, North Carolina, a 48-hour race riot against Black residents took place under the direction of a former Confederate officer. Over 500 white people burned Black homes and businesses. 14 Blacks were murdered. Newly elected Black city officials were forced to resign or be killed. So it was an insurrection in that town, and giving you a feel for race relations. They're people that perpetrated this weren't prosecuted. The idea that it was a reaction to Reconstruction, and the people that did not feel that we should be progressive. And there was a lot of sentiment, either in support by saying nothing, or outright support of those kinds of efforts. Um, in Iowa at that time, the census shows that there were over 2.2 million people. 99.5% of them were white, and 12,000, approximately zero or 0.6%, a little over 12,500 were Black. Only 382 Native Americans, and I'm wondering if the Native Americans were undercounted, but they were the third largest race group in the census, and 111 Asians. So the thought that there weren't very many Black people to support a team was supported there. Specifically, getting into 20th century significant aspects of baseball, in 4 years before the first Brownies were started, or excuse me, 14 years, 1887, the Gentleman's Agreement was voted on by minor league teams. And that Gentleman's Agreement meant that they agreed amongst the owners and managers of that time that they would not sign any African American, Black, be they American or not, or dark skinned Indian people, excuse me, or Native American people to play professional baseball. Now, it didn't fully take effect until 1898, which is 3 years before the Brownies, that there still were Black people playing professional baseball because they signed before that time, or people just didn't want to adhere to that. 3 of them played for the Brownies that were still playing until the 1898 season. Counting balls and counting foul balls and strikes was a big help for pitchers. That became the rule in 1901 when the Brownies started. And as I'm going to note a little bit later, the Brownies had a number of good pitchers, and some of the teams that had typically had Black players, typically they were the pitcher and or the catcher, which is a key element of baseball. Also, the American League in 1901, the year that the Brownies started, declared themselves a major league, and National League players, there were a number of them that jumped to the American League to give it some recognition. Then the last year the Brownies were in existence, 1903, the World Series was played. And it was between the Boston Pilgrims and the Pittsburgh Pirates, with the Pilgrims winning 5-3. So, the Algona Baseball Association, and one thing that I noticed that in the research I had to always be cognizant of, the word baseball at that time was transitioning from 2 words to 1 word. And so when I do searches online, I'd have to do them in both ways. But convention kind of won out in baseball became the name itself. But the Algona Baseball Association started in 1901 and formed the team by selling shares. And there were some major shareholders. I'll talk about a couple of them, but they are really the organization behind the team. The first person that gets recognition related to the Brownies is Edward J. Murtaugh. He was an interesting person. He was born in 1868 in Waverly, Iowa, and at the age of 15 dropped out of school and moved to Algona to become a bookkeeper for a creamery there. Excuse me. And a few years later, he started a bank in Burt, Iowa, which is just north of Algona, and that was in 1892, and he from that he parlayed himself into I think at one time he had as many as 6 or 7 banks and monetary institutions around the area, including in Algona. And he was very significant and kept records on the Brownies and what was a key person in the Algona Brownie Association or the Algona Baseball Association. The next person, I don't have a photograph of him I was able to find in the public domain, but this person, Harry Tremaine, is another interesting investor in the club. He was the first president of the Algona Baseball Association, but he was, I noticed a typo there. He was proprietor of the Dordal Hotel. The B should be a D at the bottom line there. The Dordal Hotel, and that's was right across from this from the courthouse there in Algona, and it was a really growing interest in the town there. It often I'd come across it advertising the stores that were located obviously there and along the street front at the corner, and then they had a restaurant and I believe that next to that telephone pole was the entrance to the restaurant area. There's the banner there on Durdal, if you can see that. But Tremaine was a force in the industry, hotel industry. At one time, he owned the Radisson Hotel in downtown Minneapolis at the turn of the century. So, and then he had hotels across Iowa, hotels out in California, and was quite the entrepreneur in the hotel business. But significant to the Browns, he was a key recruiter to go to Chicago and attract many of these top-notch baseball players to Algona. The first coach or manager of the first team was a local lawyer that moved to town there about the time the Brownies started. He was a new young lawyer who was captain of the Michigan football team back in 1897. And so if he was captain of the team, it's presumed that He was an outstanding athlete, and I wasn't able to find anything on his playing background, but he was assigned as the manager of the first team. I'm not sure how long he stayed as a lawyer in Algona, but he was there to get the team started. The um, players, and one, I don't know if my box there is covering. Yeah, there we go. Um, George Chappie Rat Johnson was an outstanding catcher. He's born in Ohio along the Ohio River, and I'm guessing that's where the rat came from, the river rat reference. I'm guessing, uh, but uh, but George was catcher on most of the finest black teams of that time, and uh, he played for people like Paige Fence out of Adrian, Michigan, who was a top-notch team before he came to the Brownies. He played for the Cuban X Giants, the St. Paul Colored Gophers, and the Brooklyn Royal Giants. So he played out east as well as out west here. Although prohibited from white organized baseball because of the color line, um, Chappie was often employed by major league teams and some of the top minor league teams to coach their catchers. Specifically, he worked for the Red Sox and the Minneapolis Millers. Um, Being born in Ohio and playing on high school, elementary, high school, and local teams, he uh, he was able to play in integrated situations, which I think contributed to his ability to coach white teams or white players at the major league level. The um, and also in preseason and spring ball, that would be a typical, or he would typically put together teams to play against the major leagues at that time also. So he was well known in across baseball, across the color lines. George Wilson lived in Palmyra Township, Michigan, when he joined the legendary Page Fence Giants, who were formed in Adrian, Michigan, for the Page Fence Company. And they were an all black team that were highly successful, highly talented. They served as advertisement for Page Fence. Page Fence had a special train car designed for them to travel around. And and so he started with them at a very young age at 19, and he pitched one game, and that was in 1895, and but he spent most of that 1895 season with the Adrian Demons, who were a minor league club. He's one of the last black players to play in the minor leagues in the Michigan State League. There was, which was, um, he was one of the last blacks to play until Jackie Robinson and Larry Doby. I'm a Cleveland Indians fan. I always want to add him because he was the first black in the American League that was signed, and the first black manager. But that's another thing. I get off track a little bit here, but then the third person player that played for the Brownies was Albert Burt Wakefield. He's known as the fastest first baseman, white or black. I read from in my studies, and he too was one of the last players. He played in the Kansas League. He's he was from Kansas and lifelong resident of Troy, Kansas. Some people have asked me, where did the Brownies live? And I'm thinking Wake was a typical player that they did have a permanent home, but they would come and play during the season and in Algona when they were playing for them, but then go back to their homes afterwards. But Bert, his last year in the white minor leagues was 1898. He was probably for sure the very last person of color to play in the majors that we are aware of. This person, Alexander Irwin, he didn't have as long a career as some of the others. He's a second baseman for the Brownies, born in Evanston. And he went back to Evanston to coach the Northwestern Academy, which the Iowa Bystander noted that he was most likely the only black man coaching a white team at that time in the early 1900s, and he came to the Brownies very young. He was one of the few that came without professional experience in 1903 and made his debut with the Brownies. And then in 1904, he was hired to coach at Howard University in Washington, D.C. And he coached baseball, football, and track. William Bill Holland was an outstanding pitcher, native of Aurora, Illinois, was one of the top pitchers of the era. At the age of 20, he debuted with the Chicago Unions, who was an all-black team in Chicago. And they were playing in the Chicago City League and against mostly other white teams. The next year he made after he debuted with the Unions, he went to Page Fence. When his playing days were over in the 1920s, Holland became an umpire for the Negro National League, which was started by Rube Foster, who was a Hall of Fame Negro League player and manager. Some of the incidents I wanted to point out related to that time was that during the 01 and 02 season, and part of the 02 season, the home games were played here at the Kossuth County Fairgrounds. This shows a few years later a ball game after the Brownies left. I think it was 1907. There's a baseball game going on there in this photograph, and in front of the grandstands, and looks like a fairly good crowd there. This location is still set up the same way to this day if you visit Algona. The Brownies, though, in starting in the '02 season and then into the '03 season, played many of their home games in at Arnold's Park in Lake off of Lake Okoboji. Um, they would have special team excursion buses. This is kind of small to see. Or excuse me, buses, trains. I'm sorry, but they would have excursions from like start in Garner, go through Algona, and into up to Okoboji to Arnold's Park, and you'd get on the train early in the morning. Um, and then you could and they would sometimes add concerts and boat rides and were included, and your ticket on the train was what was your ticket into the game. Then they'd as soon as the game was over with, they would return. This article recounts incident with the Brownies. This is from the New Hampton newspaper about the Brownies restore the peace, and it is what the headline says. The article went on to say, the race war has gotten into Iowa on Tuesday. A fierce fight between Algona Brownies baseball and a number of dark-skinned foreigners from the Colonel Jabbar Carnival show occurred on the Great Western train between Old Wine and Westgate. The trouble arose when one of the Jabbar troops slapped a woman. The conductor asked the Brownies to come into the car and help him stop the trouble. They responded in a body of 15 strong and put the foreigners out of business by a free use of fist and ball bats. The show people were finally put off the train out in the country and left and left there. The train was an hour and a half late to New Hampton. But I think this kind of shows how the Brownies um, were accepted because they probably did a lot of travel on the rails, and were well known with the conductor asking them to help, and New Hampton putting that in the paper. Another incident related to Brown was,
You've got 3 minutes.
oh, okay. Another incident was with Marion, or excuse me, in Minneapolis. They were playing Winnipeg, Canada, and Holland was pitching. He hit second baseman on the Winnipeg team and the Winnipeg Maroons, and subsequently that player went to the hospital. The police came 2 hours later when Holland was riding on a cart and on a city car, and was asked to was arrested and held for a couple of hours, and then the police decided it was an accident. The final one is kissing bug, yeah. Oh, yeah, kissing bug Ross, first baseman. They were playing in Chamberlain, South Dakota. A cowboy just beyond the fence with a gun. When he dropped a pop up because he reported to his teammates later that the cowboy yelled at him, "Drop it," and called him the N-word, or else, was all that was said, and so he acquiesced to that request. But the Brownies won the game 11-4. So I hope that gives you some insight. I will stop sharing my screen and answer any questions that might have come up.
We do have, actually, sorry, we're at time. So and
Oh, I'm sorry.
questions come up. You were so thorough in all of your descriptions, and I just want to, on behalf of the State Historical Society and then also History Camp, just thank you and all of our attendees today for coming to this session. We've got one more session remaining after this, so hopefully you are able to find something that piques your interest. So Reginald, thank you once again, and to everyone else, have a great afternoon and hope to see you at one of the other sessions. Thank you so much.